You know, I keep telling myself I'm not going to do any more of these sort of free tool review videos. And then my handler at Vevor said, "Do you want a mag drill?" It's like they know. Now, I don't have any imminent need for a mag drill, but for the projects I do, it's one of those things that's going to be really handy to have in the shop. So the temptation's just a little too much. Since you're a regular viewer of the channel, you already know that I've used this on a project, but we'll just pretend that didn't happen and do the whole unboxing video thing. So what's in the box? Well, there's the drill, a chuck key, coolant tank that I'll probably never use because Anchor Lube's a supporter of the channel and it wouldn't work in that tube for that. There's a little safety strap. It threads through here, so if you're up on a ladder or something, you can, I guess, strap it onto you so you don't drop it. Seems handy. There's a couple of these annular cutters. They're both the same size, 40 by 30 millimeters. I think that's a little pilot for it. And cranks and this piece of paper that tells you what's in the box. And so now I find myself in the situation of having a tool that's looking for a project to do. I've kind of always wanted one of those welding fixture tables with the 2x2 grid of holes all over it. I figure making one of those would be a good thorough test for a mag drill. After the first few holes, I decided, even though I can force a 5/8 drill bit through this, it's a lot easier if I pilot drill first. Right after I finished this, I saw a video from Fireball Tool where he was doing this with an annular cutter and a drilling template, and that's what I should have done. That made it look a lot easier than what I did. I noticed the base on here is getting hot. It doesn't say anything about the duty cycle of the base in the owner's manual, so I got out the thermal camera. It's maxing out about 120 degrees and kind of staying there, so I'm not too worried about that. This is the Top Don TC005. They sent this to me a while back. Pretty handy to have around the shop. You know, normally in some of these so-called review videos, I don't feel like I get enough of a chance to really evaluate the product. But I just drilled 165 holes. So, as I was saying, now that I've drilled 166 holes with this thing, I feel like I've got a pretty good handle on what it's all about. And what I can tell you is having a mag drill is frickin' awesome. So, should you buy this one? Maybe. I have a few caveats about it. First of all, the chuck that came on it is... I noticed it wasn't holding the center drill very well, and it also had a lot of run out in it. I checked it with an indicator. It had about 30 thousandths run out. I did have a new Jacobs chuck with a 1/2 inch 20 thread, so I put that on. That got it down to about 7 thousandths run out, which isn't great, but is reasonable for a threaded chuck. I also checked the threaded arbor that was on there. That only had about 2 thousandths run out in it. So I think if you do get this one, expect to put a better chuck on it. I could almost see putting a keyless chuck on here because if you're doing multiple operations, you don't really want to move it between holes and you just want to do lots of tool changes. But I think for what I'm going to do with it, that'll be fine. Second thing I noticed on this, the speed control is a little weird. When you start loading it, it'll bog down a little bit and then adjust speed, but then when it breaks through, it speeds up again. You can kind of hear it a little bit. But that just made it hard to have a good consistent speed with the thing. Another sort of usability thing on this, there's no quill return spring. So you have to tighten up the top Gibbs screw to get it to bind up at the top of the stroke. I was also impressed when I got this thing that has these brass or maybe aluminum bronze slides. But no, they're just yellow anodized aluminum. I also found this thing to be kind of on the loud side. This is kind of a silly thing, but I think I can kind of sum up my feelings for this tool with this switch. You have positive rotation and anti-reverse. So if you want to go regular rotation, forward, what we would call right, you turn it to the L. If you wanted to go reverse, you turn it to the R, which would be left. And so that has absolutely no impact whatsoever on the functionality of the tool. But sort of the, overall experience is it's not an enjoyable tool to use. It doesn't spark joy. I think that if you were going to use a mag drill every day, if you were out building bridges or something like that, you should probably buy a really nice one. But really, apart from the chuck, this thing's perfectly usable. So if you're like me and you're going to use it occasionally, for the price point, having this thing around is going to be really handy. Overall, drilling all these holes took me about 8 hours over several days, which is about 8 hours longer than I would have spent doing it with a hand drill because I wouldn't have done it. And that's where this thing's strong point is just having that capability. And I think that's where most of Vevor's tools fall is, for the price point, the performance is perfectly acceptable. Let's make some fixtures for this. Perfect. So I made 4 of these big clamps, and these work by just dropping into the hole, and then as you crank it down, it kind of cams in there and locks in. I also made 5 of these little pins, and I can just use these for setting up squares, laying out stuff like that. I also found this clamp at Harbor Freight. It's a drill press clamp. It has a threaded stud on it, so I just made a little threaded sleeve. That one will be handy. I also put one on the bottom of my shrinker stretcher, so I can just drop that in, use that right on here too. Should probably put this thing to use making a base that's worthy of it. I've got this base from some sort of cart that was most recently used for storing scrap metal behind my father-in-law's garage. I think I can repurpose it for this. This will be a good test to see how the magnet holds on thinner material. Let's try putting another piece of metal under the front of the magnet. In defense of this thing, that step drill was really dull, and this is still way better than doing it with a hand drill. That's a little too high. Now, because you're wondering, and I know you're going to ask, I googled it for you, and yes, you can set your welder on something that's part of the welding circuit. Bigger issue might be feeding the wire with the cable at a funny angle, but that doesn't seem to be a problem so far, and electrically it's fine. Thinking that's going to go something like that, but in order to use this, I think I want to cut this out. So just to keep things from getting too repetitive here, we'll do the unsatisfying jump to the finished product. I say finished because I obviously haven't painted it. The reason for that is I don't know that this is actually finished. I think I'll probably keep accessorizing this a little bit more. And without a paint job on here, it's a little easier to just weld things on as I go. Let me show you some of the things that I've done here. I did some cable management for my ground clamp and also for the welding hose. I noticed while I was using this that I wanted somewhere to be able to just drop this thing while I'm using it. And it also works well for storing things out of the way. I've got some storage under here. It's a little bit tight, but I can keep things like welding wire in there. And it also keeps the welding splatter off of everything below it. Same thing with the drawer. The clamp rack, obviously very satisfying. On the back side, I've got the magnetic sheet metal brake and the clamp bars for that. It's nice having a home for this thing. I just kind of tried to use what I had. This is the base from the cart for the welder, just in a little tray where I can keep whatever. Right now I'm going with welding masks. Like I said, it'll probably change as I go. And I've got some cable management for the power cord for the sheet metal brake. On the other side, I've got my oxyacetylene torch and my MIG gas bottle. Obviously weld splatter is a problem here, so I added some pieces from the welder cart and the tool cart that I cut up. And that should really help minimizing the number of comments I'm going to get about getting weld splatter on my tanks. I found that in a shop with limited space, having things consolidated where you're going to use them is a big help in staying organized and making the most of the use of your space. So I'm really happy with how this came out. And if you like this, I think you should probably go get a mag drill and make something like this for yourself. And now that that's done, I can get back to working on these wheel wells for the Jeep.